It is now my great pleasure to make the transition to the launch of the world's first Internet and Jurisdiction Global Status Report. This is an exciting new project of the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network that is intended to complement the policy development work in our existing 3 programs by fostering policy coherence and enhance capacity building around the world. We are launching this new report so that stakeholders have the data that is necessary for evidence-based policy innovation. This is especially important as the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network grows and new actors who are less familiar with global developments engage and need the knowledge. Everybody, even the stakeholders in this room, you, the world's foremost senior experts on these issues, struggle to keep track of all the trends, all the actors and all the initiatives that proliferate at unprecedented speed around the world. However, together, by sharing and combining our knowledge and data, we can grasp and map our complex and fast-changing ecosystem. Let me remind you that it is 2019 and that this is the very first time that such a comprehensive mapping of the ecosystem is done. It is an ambitious and essential effort. We hope that the world's first global status report will provide a useful baseline upon which we can build together to inform our policy discussions at global and regional levels. This compendium is a collaboration effort of the policy network. I hope that the inaugural edition and our joint data collection will grow to the benefit of all stakeholders around the world and allow us to better assess where we stand as a community and as a policy ecosystem. Today we present the first key findings of this global status report. Before giving the floor to the author, Professor Dan SVANTESSON, whom the Secretariat entrusts the writing with, I would now like to give the floor to my colleague Martin Hulden, who's the Head of Operations and Partnership Manager at the Secretariat and who's in charge of coordinating this report. Martin, you have the floor.
And the mic. Thank you very much, Paul, and also good afternoon to everybody in the room. So I have the pleasure now to give you a little bit more of an insight on the project that we've been working on for the last 12 months in parallel to preparation of this conference, the Internet Jurisdiction Global Status Report 2019. So the question everybody is asking, why the report? So as we've mentioned numerous times, one of the main takeaways that we had from the Ottawa conference last year, where many of you were with us, but also many others joined, was the realization that there is a need for a consolidated compendium of information that contains the different initiatives, actors, and ongoing developments in this very, very quickly shifting policy ecosystem. For this, we aim to create this first kind overview and documentation of these developments, and we're able to create a coalition of supporters, and would explicitly want to thank the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany, which in collaboration with GIZ has provided considerable support for this report. Also, big thanks to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark and the Republic of Estonia, which provided in the form of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs their support. The European Commission has provided institutional support and network facilitation. A few words on the methodology. So as you know, the diversity and the complexity of the ecosystem, this is not something that somebody writes hidden in a little room in the corner, but we put a big emphasis on ensuring that this is a combination of in-depth desk research, of an innovative, large-scale collaborative contribution, as well as a review process that creates a certain degree of also ownership of those who have contributed to the report. We have circulated detailed surveys and have conducted direct interviews with numerous experts, thus leveraging the combined expertise of over 100 global key stakeholders. And as to our knowledge, over 35 of these people are with us today in this room. So also a big thank you to you who have provided us this invaluable information. This is a starting point because essentially we aim to build a contributors and network of experts that enables this global status report also to be a mapping tool moving forwards. This is not, the end, but it's the beginning of a longer road. And as this is also a network of people, it is really an essential part of the undertaking to ensure that we have global reach. And we hope that this first baseline that the Global Status Report in its 2019 edition enables exactly that. A few words on the full edition that will be released in time for the Internet Governance Forum of the United Nations in November 2019. The copies that you all have in your delegate packs are the key findings. They have all the essential knowledge, all the acknowledgements, all the details, but we will do full versions of chapters 3 to 5, which are the lists of the different topical trends, legal technical approaches, and concept clusters, as we call a beefed up glossary. And we will invite all stakeholders that are interested in contributing between July and October of this year to contribute any type of knowledge, any type of information that you might have on the ongoing initiatives, on the actors that you've been exposed to, so that we can start collecting this in addition to the already facilitated work, so that in time for the IGF we also make a very big and visible stand in regards to the need of the collaboration across all of these different stakeholder groups. Looking forward, in 2019, as we said, there will be two main items which are the key findings today, the IGF full version in 2019. Then we are basically starting next week already with the initiation of the work of the Internet and Jurisdiction and UN ECLAC Regional Status Report, which in collaboration with the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean of the United Nations, and also thanks to the support provided to us from the get-go from the Federal Ministry of Cooperation and Development of Germany and GIZ, we are able to keep going. And if the presentation could come back, then I can show the next slide. Thank you very much. There will be a regional data collection that will feed into this regional report, and it will be zoom in into the nuances and the particularities also of this particular region, which will thus then feed into the subsequent global data collection for the next edition of the Global Status Report. And we invite also that you think openly with us how we can make this type of data collection more efficient, how we can ensure that we have coverage in other regions that also deserve to be showcased, that also deserve to be heard. That's what we are for. I would like to leave you with 2 points before I would give the floor over to Dan SVANTESSON, whom we have included in authoring de facto as the lead author this report. And these questions. Firstly, here you can see that 95% of the experts that we have interviewed basically have given us the feedback that there are storm clouds forming on the horizon. And this information becomes even more critical if we then yet nevertheless see that the coordination needed to tackle these challenges seems to be insufficient. At least that's the feedback that we got so far. So I leave this here for now. I will now hand over to Professor Dan SVANTESSON, whom we also like to thank once again explicitly, and also thank for the help provided by Rebecca Azopardi, who was research assistant at the University of Bonn, where Professor SVANTESSON is in charge of the Faculty of Law. So Dan, you have the floor for more contextual information.
Thank you, Martin. You just promoted me. I'm not in charge of a faculty, but I thank you for the promotion. I've been writing about internet jurisdiction issues almost exclusively for the last 18 years. So I'm very, very happy to see an event like this. It's like Christmas and New Year's all rolled into one for me. So thank you to the organizers, and thanks also, of course, to everyone who helped contribute to this status report. I think we are at a very exciting point in time in that finally there's a genuine and strongly felt appetite for real action, and I think that's an important message also for what we will be doing here in Berlin over the coming days. Would you mind changing this? I can take that one here. Yeah. I could talk about the report for hours or probably days, but I'm going to be very brief. And I know you'll all be good students and read this before bedtime tonight. Not that I'm suggesting it's going to put you to sleep or anything, but do read it tonight. It's a thrilling read, I'm hopeful. Now, if these are a few of the highlights of the report, I think nobody in this room will be particularly surprised to see these being the highlights. And that's, of course, because all that's in the report comes from the network. And I think it's because these points of view come from you collectively as the expert stakeholders. That's why it's so important to collect this and document it and now communicate it. And I hope you all can help contribute to bringing attention to the report now, which is the next step in a sense. Slide, thanks. Now, one of the questions that we asked was this: will increased regulation of cyberspace or internet be a problem or a solution? And I must admit that I expected a much more polarized answer to this, but it seems quite clear that the majority sees regulation and indeed increased regulation as possibly a necessity, but of course at the same time recognizing that bad regulation, and we see some of that around, unbalanced and unused regulation is seriously part of a problem. And that brings us to the challenges that we have. One, perhaps the biggest challenge that we face here is that we often in this field, more so than in any other field really, face the balancing or reconciling of competing legitimate interests. We, in certain settings, certainly need effective data privacy protection at the same time as we need effective law enforcement, and these don't always fit together perfectly, and we need to then engage in reconciling and balancing. And what we face in that setting is what we might call a genuine regulatory challenge. But not all of the challenges we face are of that nature. Slide, thanks. Some challenges we face are of our own construction. By relying on outdated or at least inadequate concepts, we often create artificial regulatory challenges. One favorite example of this is, for me at least, territorial versus extraterritorial, which is basically the way we approach jurisdictional claims all too often. It's a bit like the binary distinction between day and night. So a few days ago, before I went to Europe and I was standing by my house and took this photo, was it day or night? No, well, it was dawn. And so already there we see that the binary distinction between day and night is insufficient to describe everything. And of course we know that the 24-hour period that we talk about as day and night is a gradual change with lots of nuances. And it's the same with jurisdictional claims. It's way too simplistic to break them down in a binary sense with territorial or extraterritorial. So we need to move past such artificial regulatory challenges. And I think we can do so quite quickly and easily if we are a bit open-minded and creative. And focusing on this territorial-extraterritorial distinction and its adequacy is because of that we see things like this three-factor jurisprudential framework for jurisdiction gaining a little bit of support, I think, and models like it. We need something more advanced than these sort of simplistic approaches. Slide, thanks. Now, one matter that arose again and again in writing the report is just how much is happening in relation to internet intermediaries and more broadly normative plurality. It's nothing new, the idea that law is not the only regulatory force affecting the online environment. I mentioned, for example, here Lessig's works from about 20 years ago. So law as a regulatory force is important, but it's not the only regulatory force, and that's of course well established. And even though these are not new questions, it struck me in writing the report just how much work remains to be done when it comes to the relationship between law and, for example, the terms of service of platforms. Okay, slide. Now, I think one of the barriers we face too is that we are too often working from a perspective of having preconceived notions of what the solutions are going to look like. We look in the rear view mirror to what we've done in the past and think we're going to solve everything in that way. But I think that doesn't work. We can look a little bit at how children work and learn from them in this context, I think. This is a result of my daughter, I think she was 2 at the time or something, doing a puzzle. And she had no preconceived notions as to what the solution of the puzzle was going to look like. And with a bit of creativity, determination, and possibly a degree of violence, she managed to put together the pieces in this quite interesting manner. Now we need to copy all that, maybe leaving out the violence bit, but we need to be more creative. We need to be prepared to not just look at how we've done things in the past and not have these preconceived notions of how the solution should look like. And when it comes to internet jurisdiction, I think we might need a few more pieces to the puzzle. I think we're working with an incomplete set at the moment, and that's part of the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dan, and I can tell the stakeholder plenary here that we have thought a lot about who could write such a report and map and collect all the knowledge that is in the policy network, and Dan was really our first choice, so thank you for the hard work and dedication. I now would like to give the floor to the three of the governments that made this report possible with their financial contributions to share why they believe in the importance of this new global effort. So I would like to start with INGRID-GABRIELA HOVEN, the Director General for Global Issues at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Paul, and many thanks for excellent introduction from both of you. We have been honored actually to co-sponsor this report, and we are going to continue to support the work in this line, especially I think that the envisaged deep dives on regional matters are really key. As State Secretary Herta said, we are partially actually embarking on uncharted territory. And what is needed when you really want to get a good direction where you should go, where you should invest, where you should actually strengthen capacities, regulations, and make institutions fit for purpose, you need a baseline. You need to know what's out there, what's working, what hasn't worked so far, or perhaps hasn't fulfilled the expectations that we have actually expected them to deliver. Why is the Ministry for Development Cooperation embarking on this exercise? You may ask yourself, at the side of our colleagues from the Economic Affairs Ministry. Because let's look at those figures. About half of the world's population is still not connected to the internet. But we all know what the internet could offer with respect to economic growth, mobilization of the private sector, and in knowledge sharing that could really scale up good initiatives and make developing countries, put them in a position to catch up for the future. So what we are experiencing right now is that we have already a vast digital divide, and this reinforces existing inequalities. The report from the UN Secretary General that was just, so to say, shared with governments actually has underlined the growing inequalities in countries as actually a threat to peace, security, and good economic perspectives. So we know that digitalization, the internet can provide a lot of good things, but unless we put institutions in countries in a position to really use the potential of the internet, we are going to leave them behind. What is already quite harmful is actually the digital divide for women. All else equal, poor women in urban areas of developing countries are 30 to 50% less likely to access the internet than men, despite the dramatic spread in mobile phones. And this certainly limits the potential for economic development and civic participation significantly. This means that a big and important part of the society is excluded from participation. We have started, take another example. Cyber violence against women and girls is a serious issue. Research suggests that more than 70% of women online have already been exposed to or have experienced some form of online violence like stalking, sexual harassment, and threats of rape and death. And we expect